The WWE Universe was brought to a standstill. Not by a match. Not by a title change. But by something far more haunting. The kind of news that doesn't just shift storylines, it breaks hearts, dissolves alliances, and pierces through the persona of even the strongest factions. The Bloodline, WWE's most dominant dynasty in recent memory, has been rocked to its very core. A chilling announcement made backstage during the closing minutes of Friday Night SmackDown left fans, superstars, and even longtime enemies of the faction stunned into silence. A beloved member of the Bloodline was gone. No pyrotechnics. No entrance theme. Just a somber press release posted to WWE's internal talent portal. The words were cold. Surgical. We regret to inform you that a member of the Bloodline has passed away. No name. No photo. Just silence and a link marked "For official eyes only." Within minutes, whispers became roars. Backstage, even the most battle-hardened superstars fell into a stunned stillness. Paul Heyman, often the orchestrator of chaos, was reportedly seen with trembling hands, pacing in circles, refusing to speak. Security was placed at every exit. Phones were confiscated from crew members. And Roman Reigns? The tribal chief was nowhere to be seen. It started hours earlier, long before the cameras rolled for SmackDown's live broadcast. Around 4:43 p.m., a WWE medic was seen rushing into one of the Bloodline's private locker rooms at the Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. A stretcher followed moments later. Staff attempted to conceal the movement with black curtains, but a few sharp-eyed fans in attendance noticed the commotion. One claimed on Twitter that she saw Solo Sikoa being carried, pale and limp, like something had drained the life out of him. Another said they spotted Zilla Fatu in tears, screaming at security to let him through. The footage never made it to television. WWE cut to a generic promo package, hiding the panic behind standard corporate polish. But for those inside the building, reality was unraveling. The locker room knew. Something tragic had happened. For years, the Bloodline has been defined by power, pride, and absolute control. Roman Reigns stood atop the mountain, dictating the future of not just his family, but of the entire WWE landscape. JUSO, the once hesitant lieutenant, became main event J. Jimmy, torn between loyalty and resentment, fell in line, then fell apart. Solo Sikoa emerged as the enforcer, the quiet storm that kept everything in check. But behind the tribal chants, behind the black lace and red attire, was a family, complicated, fragile, wounded by legacy and the weight of expectation. And now, they were broken. Initial speculation pointed to Solo. He had been absent from the opening segment, where Jacob Fatu and Tama Tonga were scheduled to confront Paul Heyman. Reports claimed that Solo had collapsed moments before rehearsal, clutching his chest, whispering something incoherent about voices and forgiveness. But when the official notice came, it wasn't his name listed in the backstage medical report. Nor was it Jimmy's. Nor was it Zilla's. The name that sent shockwaves through the arena and echoed in the hearts of everyone connected to the Bloodline was Joseph Sefa Fatu Solo Sikoa. Dead at 31. The enforcer. The silent protector. The man whose icy stare and calculated violence had struck fear into the hearts of champions, was gone. And no one saw it coming. WWE's legal team moved fast. They issued an emergency confidentiality agreement to all talent present at the venue. No Instagram posts. No tweets. No backstage photos. The company wanted to control the message. But something this massive, this devastating, couldn't be contained. The news slipped through like blood through fingers. Within an hour, locker room insiders leaked fragments of the story to dirt sheets. Solo had reportedly been found unconscious in his locker room around 4:30 p.m. A cryptic note had been discovered near his body. One line was legible. It read, "I didn't want it to end this way. Forgive me, Yus." Fans flooded social media with prayers, questions, and disbelief. Was this real? Was this kayfabe? Had WWE gone too far? But this wasn't a storyline. There was no swerve. No dramatic comeback planned. No hidden cameras rolling. This was real. Painfully, achingly real. The first public acknowledgement came not from WWE, but from an unlikely source, Jey Uso. Moments after the final match of the night, Jey rushed past production staff, bypassed gorilla position, and walked straight into the middle of the ring. No music. No mic. Just his presence. His face was stained with tears. His hands were shaking. He pointed to the hard cam and simply said, "He was my brother." Not just on TV. In real life. Don't ever forget that. The crowd fell into eerie silence. Then a chant broke out, "Solo! Solo! Solo!" Jey dropped to his knees, overwhelmed, before being gently helped out of the ring by Sami Zayn, who had sprinted from backstage in street clothes. Sami, no longer a member of the Bloodline, had once called Solo a brother too. For one night, past betrayals didn't matter. Not when death had entered the ring backstage. The atmosphere was suffocating. Jacob Fatu reportedly punched a mirror in the hallway and had to be restrained by security. Jimmy Uso was locked in a private suite, refusing to speak to anyone. Paul Heyman, the self-proclaimed wise man, was inconsolable. Those closest to him said he was whispering something over and over under his breath. Not Solo. Anyone but Solo. The last time the wrestling world had been this unified in grief was when Eddie Guerrero passed away. Or when Brody Lee was taken too soon. But this hit different. This wasn't just a fan favorite or a respected locker room leader. This was Solo Sikoa, the muscle that protected the very soul of the Bloodline. The last line of defense. The man who always stood with his arms crossed while chaos burned around him, and now he was gone. Autopsy reports are pending. WWE released an official statement 2 hours after the initial internal memo. It read, "It is with profound sadness that WWE confirms the passing of Joseph Solo Sikoa Fatu. He was a cherished performer, a devoted family member, and a fierce protector of his bloodline. We extend our heartfelt condolences to the Fatu family, his fans, and the entire WWE universe." No details were given on the cause of death. But insiders whispered about heart complications. Others believed it was something far darker. A few spoke of a psychological break in the days leading up to the tragedy. Some said Solo hadn't been himself for weeks. That he had begun skipping training. That he'd grown paranoid. Believing someone within the Bloodline was plotting to betray him. He reportedly confided in Paul Heyman days before his death, asking, "What happens when the enforcer has no one left to protect?" Roman Reigns has not been seen since the announcement. WWE officials claimed he was taking time to grieve with family, but conflicting reports suggest he was in Florida the day Solo died. Some even claim Roman had been scheduled for a surprise backstage segment, one that never happened. Rumors swirled that Roman and Solo had spoken briefly before the incident. No one knows what was said. The next morning, flowers were placed in front of the Amalie Arena loading dock. Anonymous cards. Red lace. A single photo of Solo in full gear, arms folded, that trademark scowl hiding what now looks like a storm beneath the surface. Superstars began posting cryptic messages on social media. Cody Rhodes tweeted simply, "Some losses don't make sense. Rest easy, warrior." Becky Lynch shared a black screen with the words, "The ring feels colder today." Even Brock Lesnar, who hadn't tweeted in months, posted a photo of him and Solo backstage at SummerSlam, two titans who had exchanged no words, just mutual respect. But it wasn't just the talent who mourned. The fans were devastated. Thousands of tribute videos flooded YouTube. TikToks with old highlights of Solo's matches set to emotional music. Hashtags like #ThankYouSolo and #BloodlineBroken trended worldwide. Even the most critical of wrestling fans admitted that something monumental had been lost. Not just a performer, but a presence. An aura. A force that, for all his silence, had carried the Bloodline through its most turbulent arcs, and still, questions remain. What really happened to Solo Sikoa in that locker room? What did the note mean? What was he asking forgiveness for? Was there a betrayal we didn't see? Did something fracture inside the bloodline that day, something irreversible? WWE has remained tight-lipped. But something is brewing. Sources say that SmackDown's script for next week has been completely rewritten. A closed-door meeting with high-ranking talent and creative was held Sunday morning in Stamford, Connecticut. No leaks have emerged from that meeting. But the word whispered most often in its wake, fallout. Because Solo's death wasn't just a tragedy. It was a trigger. Jacob Fatu, Zilla Fatu, Tama Tonga, all of them are reportedly demanding answers. A clash is looming. Not over a title. Not over pride. But over grief, loyalty, and blame. The bloodline is shaking. Its foundation cracked. Its warriors mourning. Its future uncertain. And the tribal chief? He has yet to speak. The silence, in this case, is deafening. Let that silence sink in, for something is coming next week that may change everything. But for now, only one truth remains: Solo Sikoa is gone. And the bloodline may never be the same again. The funeral was closed door. No cameras. No media. No ring attire. Just family, blood family. But even in that sacred space, the fractures within the bloodline could not be hidden. The somber gathering was held in Hawaii, where the Fatu lineage began its wrestling legacy. WWE offered to broadcast a tribute montage during Raw and SmackDown, but the family declined. Instead, what took place beneath the swaying palm trees and in the shadow of ancestral land was something raw, something real. Roman Reigns arrived first. Alone. No entourage. No suit. He wore black jeans, a simple fitted shirt, and dark sunglasses. Witnesses say he didn't speak to anyone for nearly 20 minutes. He just stood at Solo's closed casket, one hand on the lid, whispering inaudible words that only the ocean wind could carry away. Jacob Fatu was the last to arrive. And when he saw Roman, something shifted in the air, an almost supernatural tension. The two men locked eyes across the open field. There were no greetings. No embraces. Not even a nod of acknowledgement. It was as if the death of Solo Sikoa had resurrected something long buried between them. A silence that screamed louder than any promo ever could. Zilla Fatu stood by the casket, his eyes bloodshot, fists clenched. Jimmy Uso remained seated most of the time, head bowed low, sunglasses hiding the grief he could no longer verbalize. No one had seen Jey Uso. Rumors spread that he refused to attend, that he couldn't bear to look inside the casket of the brother who had died before they could reconcile. It was Paul Heyman who broke the silence. The man who had once referred to himself as the wise man of the bloodline stepped to the center of the field, his voice hoarse and aged. He was more than a wrestler. He was the soul we didn't know we needed, Heyman said, choking on his own words. He didn't speak much because he didn't have to. His loyalty spoke for him. And now, that silence will haunt us. A single tear rolled down Roman's cheek. After the ceremony, as family began to disperse, whispers began circulating again. Jacob was seen speaking to an elder of the Anoa'i family, gesturing passionately. Zilla stormed away from a private conversation with Jimmy. What was meant to be a unifying moment had instead uncovered deeper rifts. There was talk, quiet, tentative, but persistent, that Solo's death wasn't as natural as WWE's statement suggested. That the pressure, the mental strain, the isolation enforced by his role as the bloodline's enforcer had driven him to a breaking point. Some even questioned if his collapse was entirely self-inflicted. There were rumors, unconfirmed but chilling, that Solo had recently confronted Roman about the future of the bloodline. That he had been troubled by something that happened backstage weeks prior, a confrontation between Roman and a mysterious individual never seen on camera. That Solo had begun to feel like a pawn, not a protector. One insider claimed Solo was preparing to walk away. That he was tired of the inner war between Roman's calculated dominance and Jacob's rising influence. That the enforcer had become the liability. If that's true, then maybe Solo didn't die from the weight of a single moment. Maybe it was years of pressure that finally collapsed the man whose entire identity had been forged in silence. Maybe the cause of death wasn't a heart giving out, but a heart broken by betrayal, confusion, and a loyalty that was never reciprocated. In the days following the funeral, WWE began to experience an aftershock. Roman Reigns withdrew from all scheduled appearances. His private jet was grounded. His locker room was cleared out. And no statement has been issued. Jacob Fatu returned to SmackDown that Friday, but he didn't wrestle. Instead, he interrupted the main event with a microphone in hand and fire in his eyes. "This isn't over," he said. "You think we can bury him and move on? No. Someone's gonna pay. Someone let him break. Someone let him die. And I don't care if that someone wears a crown, calls himself tribal chief, or hides behind silence, I'm coming." The crowd gasped. Not because of the words, but because of the tone. This wasn't scripted. This wasn't for show. This was grief weaponized into vengeance. Jacob Fatu, the Bloodline's rising warlord, was no longer interested in dominance. He wanted justice. He wanted truth. He wanted blood. Meanwhile, Jey Uso finally resurfaced on Raw. His appearance was unscheduled, his demeanor colder than ever before. When asked backstage about Solo, he replied with a whisper, "I should have answered his last call." Then he walked away, his eyes vacant. Paul Heyman has gone dark. Those close to him say he's been unreachable. He reportedly suffered a mild panic attack after being pressed about Solo's final days. Sources close to WWE claim that Heyman had been aware of Solo's deteriorating condition. That he knew the enforcer was unraveling, and did nothing. Heyman's fingerprints are all over the Bloodline's rise. But now, there's blood on those hands, and Roman Reigns remains silent. No tweets. No appearances. No statements. Not even leaked whispers from insiders. It's as if the tribal chief has vanished into the shadows he once commanded. Some believe he's in deep mourning. Others believe he's in hiding. A few claim that he's preparing something. Something massive. Something final, because Solo Sikoa wasn't just a casualty. He was the warning shot. The equilibrium of the Bloodline has shattered. Jacob no longer trusts Roman. Zilla is spiraling between revenge and despair. Jimmy is emotionally paralyzed. Jey is haunted by regret. And Paul Heyman stands at the center of it all, perhaps the only man who knows the full truth. But truths this large don't stay buried, and as WWE prepares for its next premium live event, one already rebranded Fall of the Dynasty, there's a sense that something historic is coming. Not just a storyline shift. Not just a match. But a reckoning. A war that will redefine not only the Bloodline but the entire WWE landscape, because this is no longer about championships. It's about loss. It's about guilt. It's about vengeance. And it's about the ghost of a man who once stood silent behind his brothers, and whose silence now echoes across every arena. The Bloodline trembles not from defeat but from what's about to rise in Solo's name. SmackDown's next episode opened differently. There was no theme song. No opening pyro. No crowd hype. Just darkness, and the low rumble of ocean waves crashing against a distant shore. Then a voiceover, deep and cracked with sorrow. They thought the enforcer would never fall. But every fortress has a weak stone. Every kingdom loses a son. And now, the Bloodline will face what comes after. On screen, a black and white montage of Solo Sikoa's most iconic moments. His brutal debut when he attacked Drew McIntyre. The silent stares between him and Roman during War Games. His emotionless execution of Sami Zayn during the Bloodline's betrayal arc. And then, finally, a slow zoom in on the moment he stood face to face with Jacob Fatu, before they embraced under the weight of legacy. Cut to black. Then one sentence. In memory of Joseph Solo Sikoa Fatu, 1993 to 2025. The crowd watching from the arena was dead silent. And then it started. A slow chant. Thank you, Solo. Thank you, Solo. Backstage, WWE was holding its breath. Not because of the tribute, but because of what came next. For over a week, no one had seen Roman Reigns. His silence had become a haunting void at the center of the company. Rumors had spread like wildfire. He was in Samoa. He was hospitalized. He had walked away from the business entirely. But just as the commentators tried to steer the show back to regular programming, something happened. A private jet landed at a nearby airfield. Roman Reigns stepped off, alone, clad in all black. No entourage. No security. Just the tribal chief. And grief wrapped around him like a second skin. By the time the final segment of the night began, the arena was buzzing with tension. Then, the lights dimmed. A single spotlight hit the stage. And from the smoke, he emerged, Roman Reigns, but this was not the Roman of old. There was no golden lei. No confident strut. His face was pale, eyes hollow, beard unkempt. The weight of loss sat heavily on his shoulders, visible in every movement. He carried no microphone. He didn't need one. The crowd knew. This wasn't about theatrics. He stepped into the ring and just stood there, staring at the hard cam. For a full minute, he said nothing. Then, finally, a mic was handed to him. His voice was low. Strained. Controlled. Solo was more than family. He was the spine of this dynasty. And I failed him. The crowd gasped. I put the weight of the kingdom on his shoulders. I told him to enforce, to obey, to never question. And when he broke, I wasn't there. He paused. I hid. I ran. Because even tribal chiefs fear the consequences of their own reflection. Tears welled in his eyes, but they didn't fall. Roman Reigns stood in that ring, the self-proclaimed god of WWE, and confessed, not just failure, but guilt. The arena was frozen. Then, the lights flickered. A new theme hit. Jacob Fatu. He stormed down the ramp with fury in every step. No smile. No patience. Just pain. He grabbed a mic and didn't wait for the music to fade. You don't get to cry now, Roman. You don't get to grieve when you're the reason he's in the ground. Roman didn't flinch. I know, he said softly. Jacob stepped closer, chest heaving. You turned him into a machine. Made him your blade. Your shadow. And when he started to bleed, you walked away. I couldn't save him, Roman said. You didn't try. Jacob shouted. You buried your humanity in that damn crown, and now you're here playing victim? The crowd was on edge. You could feel it, violence hovering like smoke. Roman raised his hand slightly. You want to fight me? Fine. You want revenge? Fine. But I need you to understand something first. He stepped forward, inches from Jacob's face. Solo died, because we all forgot he was human. And then he dropped the mic. The two men stood nose to nose, fury and mourning colliding. But they didn't fight. Not yet. Jacob's fists were clenched, but he didn't swing. Roman's arms hung loose, vulnerable, almost daring Jacob to strike. But what happened next shocked everyone. Zilla Fatu's music hit. He came out with tears in his eyes and no emotion in his face. His voice shook when he reached the ring. I watched my brother spiral. I watched all of you pretend not to notice. He looked at Roman. You gave orders. Then at Jacob, you followed them. And finally at the crowd, and I did nothing. He took out something from his pocket. It was the note, Solo's last words. He read it aloud. I didn't want it to end this way. Forgive me, Yus. Zilla folded the paper, stepped forward, and placed it in the center of the ring. We all failed him. A heavy silence hung in the air. This was no longer about tribal warfare or championship gold. This was grief. Raw, unfiltered grief, on national television, from the most dominant faction in WWE history, now fractured by death and silence. And then, through the somber atmosphere, a figure appeared on the Titantron. It was JUSO, live from an undisclosed location. He wore no ring gear. Just a hoodie and sorrow in his eyes. His voice was quiet. I couldn't go to the funeral. I couldn't look at him in that casket. Because the last time we talked, I yelled at him. I told him he was blind. That he was being used. That he'd regret it. He paused, and now I regret everything. Jay leaned forward, looking into the lens. This bloodline was supposed to be family. Not a prison. And if we're gonna move forward, we need to bury the lies with Solo. Or else we'll all die like he did, alone. The screen faded to black, and just like that, the bloodline was no longer a faction. It was a graveyard, a dynasty choking on its own legacy. The next day, WWE updated its programming slate. A new premium event had been announced, WWE Judgment Day, Requiem for the Bloodline. The tagline? What do you do when the story becomes a tragedy? The WWE Universe is now waiting, not for redemption, not for a return, but for a reckoning, and somewhere. Solo Sikoa's ghost watches. 3 weeks had passed since the funeral, yet the presence of Solo Sikoa still loomed like a phantom over WWE. His name wasn't mentioned every night, but you felt it in the air. In the hesitant commentary. In the hollow stares between former allies. In the tremble of Roman's once authoritative voice. The ring ropes hadn't changed, the arena still filled, but the bloodline? It was dying in real time. Not by war. Not by betrayal. But by the heavy, unrelenting hand of grief. The locker room was split in half. There were those who believed Roman Reigns should step down permanently. That his era of dominance, of manipulation masked as leadership, was over. That the title of tribal chief was tainted by the death of the man who enforced it. These voices grew louder with each passing show. Even commentators once careful to protect the kayfabe now hesitated. Corey Graves, usually calculated in his language, openly questioned during Raw whether the weight of guilt might finally be too much for Roman to carry. And then there were those who defended him. Superstars who knew what it meant to lead, who understood the burden of power. Seth Rollins went live on Instagram one night and said, "You don't get to point fingers unless you've been the guy at the top. Unless you've had people depend on your silence, your control, your every move. Roman's grieving, and we should let him." But the one person who hadn't spoken yet was Jimmy Uso until now. On a rainy Monday night in Chicago, the unexpected happened. Jimmy walked into the ring during a commercial break unannounced, with no theme music. Just the sound of his footsteps. He looked different. Thinner. Eyes sunken. Beard grown out. He wore Solo's hoodie, the one from their last WrestleMania entrance together. The cameras came back live mid-ring. He stood with a mic in his hand. The crowd, sensing something real, fell into a tense hush. "For 3 weeks, I've tried to write this promo. For 3 weeks, I've rewritten what I'd say about my brother," Jimmy began, his voice cracking. He looked straight into the camera, "but the truth is, words won't bring Solo back." He paused, gripping the mic tighter. "None of this will. The tears, the tributes, the hashtags. They don't change the fact that my baby brother is gone." The crowd watched, holding their collective breath. "I spent years protecting him. Just like he protected us. But I also spent years ignoring his silence. Because it was easier to believe he was unshakable than admit he was human." Jimmy looked to the rafters, blinking back tears. "I didn't listen. And now, I don't get to hear his voice ever again."